Chapter 2: Cat Burglar or Crazy Man. I have what I like to think of as a business, though work tends to come and go more or less serendipitously. Not long after my divorce, I met an author of courtroom dramas at one of Amelia's dinner parties. I did research for 2 or 3 of his books, and he passed me along to other authors of similar works. I provided information on cases I found interesting, observed courtroom practices, and picked up enough of the language to tell authors when their false notes were really jarring. This brought me a significant influx of pocket change. Between my inheritance and the divorce settlement, my basic costs are covered, and it kept me busy for a while. Eventually, I fancied that I might like to be a lawyer instead of just hanging out around courthouses trying to pick up tidbits for novels. I attended law school for a couple of years, my Southern California period, but I found the law much less interesting in real life. Soon enough, I was back in San Francisco. Well-to-do people are always saying that they work for the challenge or the excitement or the fun. For myself, as long as money was not an issue, I found that I could be quite content for long stretches of time without anything most people would categorize as work. So you're rich? My last business flourished in the late 1990s, when young people totally lacking in breeding were acquiring huge sums of money for having bright ideas. My own bright idea was to teach them some manners. It started rather accidentally, with my giving advice to a friend of Sally's, who had made millions in stock options during the dot com boom. What? And hoped to use his money. However, new, to gain admission to the exclusive circle of inherited wealth in San Francisco. This isn't accomplished as simply as sending an accountant's statements to some club. Having been born into a mixed marriage, half old money, half Polish carpenter, okay, and having married into old money a substantial sum, a native to San Francisco, I found myself uniquely qualified to show a selected few hours to behave as though they came from a long line of wealthy forefathers. After all, I'd spend most of my childhood translating my mother's behavior for my father, and vice versa. The business briefly flourished, providing more income for a couple of years than the investments from my divorce settlements. Then, of course, with the bust, my business vanished, except for a few continuing clients who managed to sell before everyone else did. During the boom years, I turned a corner of my dining room into a home office, with a rather beautiful armoire that hid all of the essentials. When the bust came, it was still a nice piece of furniture, and I kept it there, although it now concealed nothing more than a laptop computer, printer, and a few paltry office supplies. I was sitting there after breakfast one day, checking email and returning notes. Shadow had wandered off. Usually he slept until lunchtime, so I was a bit surprised when I heard him begin to cat chatter. Cat owners will understand when I say that he seemed to be calling to me. Oh my God. Absorbed in my work, I hollered, "What's the matter, Shadow?" Sometimes, under similar circumstances, Shadow would come find me to tell me, in his own way, what new vision had caught his eye. But this time, my question didn't bring the cat chatter any closer. Then, something very heavy fell to the floor. "Shadow!" I shouted. As I threw open the French doors that separate my dining room from the living room, the noise was explained easily enough. At a craft show some time ago, I acquired a piece of cat furniture shaped like a miniature tree, perhaps 3 feet tall, covered in carpeting. Its branches provided various places where the cat can have a bath, look out the window, or simply doze. The whole structure, which was quite solid, had toppled over, knocking a lamp askew. "Good Lord, Shadow!" I exclaimed. "How did you manage that?" Then I froze. A leg, a trousered rather than furred, extended out from one end of the treehouse, and as I opened my mouth to shout, a hand and then a face appeared from behind it. None of these appendages, of course, belonged to my cat. "I'm sorry," said the man. "I guess this wasn't a good idea, but I don't think anything is broken." "How did you get in there?" I squeaked, my throat muscles tight with fear. "Who are you?" And then I saw exactly who he was, or appeared to be. The actor, or a reasonable facsimile. "You don't have to worry," Sally had said, "unless he starts turning up during the day when you're sure you're awake." Sooner than my body seemed to recognize that the time to worry had come. My legs began to melt, and I let myself settle to the floor. Totally without my knowledge or consent, I'd obviously crossed the line from sanity to something else. My eyes told me that the man of my dreams was getting to his feet now, looking a bit sheepish, but my eyes had to be lying, so I closed them tightly. "You are not real," I said. "You're just a particularly vivid figment of my imagination. Shadow is the only one in this apartment besides me. Shadow is the only one in this apartment besides me. Shadow is the only one." Maybe saying it would snap me out of this. What do they call them? Psychotic breaks? "I'm right here," he said, and I felt a very human hand touch my arm. "Are you all right? Let me help you." I opened my eyes. The actor was crouched beside me, looking worried. The scent I smelled in my dreams wafted toward me. There was a small scratch on one of his hands, and a little blood was oozing out. I could hear him breathing. He certainly seemed real. My thoughts took a hard turn right. What if he was real? A headline flashed, "Middle-aged socialite," because that, after all, is what I must seem like to others. "Murdered and Presidio Heights flat." "Who are you?" I said, using my legs to push myself away from him and across the floor. "And what are you doing here?" "I live here," he said. My God, this is the part. Oh, really? What makes you think so? You've found a way to come and go through a window, God knows how, but you certainly don't live here." "You don't know who I am," he said, with a twinkle in his eye. "What fun!" "Not for me," I said, and now I found the strength to pull myself into a standing position again, though once I was upright, I needed to lean against the couch. "Where is Shadow?" he asked. "Do you see him?" I looked for him in vain. "What have you done to him?" I said, my panic turning to plain old-fashioned anger. "You better not have hurt Shadow. He's my one true love," he finished for me. "That's what I call Shadow." "Exactly," he said. I shook my head. "So you've been eavesdropping too? Who are you?" "You really don't know me." Now he was grinning ear to ear. "Of course I don't know you. You look like that fellow on television. But I'm sure he's much too busy with his films, or whatever he does, to be invading San Francisco apartments. And for that matter, I don't know him either. You certainly look a lot like him." "I look exactly like him," the man said, with evident satisfaction. "Just the way he was on TV." "What?" "You saw him. You said he was handsome. You said I'd look just like him if I were a man. I thought this would please you." Now the floor was dissolving again. "Yes, I said that to Shadow just the other day." "Right. And—" I shook my head, trying to clear it. "You're either a figment of my imagination, in which case you'll disappear pretty soon with any luck, or you're playing some nasty game with me, in which case I'd like you to leave now, please." "How can I leave he said with genuine distress. You never let me go outside. You would be angry. He looked thoughtful. I could be a cat again if you like. I thought you might be a cat again? Yes, a gray cat with green eyes and a red leather collar that's actually pretty comfortable compared to this, he said impatiently, putting a finger inside his shirt collar. You know, the cat you live with? I believe you call him Shadow. You're saying that you are Shadow, of course, he said. The impatience turned to a certain testiness. Who else would I be? You know, this simply isn't possible, I began, turning away and trying to walk off my agitation. I'm quite sure my imagination is not that good, I said, feeling just a bit relieved. So you must be the crazy one. Why, because I'm a cat? Hmm, because you think you're a cat. Cats don't turn into men, you see. Not all cats, he agreed. As it happens, I'm a cat in the middle of his ninth life. For certain highly developed cats, the ninth life is a time of extraordinary powers, extraordinary opportunities. I am so goddamn happy that I am getting backstory into cat law. Thank God for this. He paused. I don't mean to be boastful. I had no idea I was one of those highly developed cats until I tried to be human. And as you see, it worked. I stared at him. I thought it would make you happy, he said. I thought maybe if I was a man, you wouldn't be so lonely, and we could just be together. You and me. He smiled. I could even go out with you sometimes. I think I'd like to go out. Oh, for God's sake, I said, turning my back on him and walking into the hall. I took a jacket from the closet. It was too bizarre, standing there talking to this man who claimed to be a cat, this man who claimed to have achieved such a feat to ease my loneliness. Look, I don't know who you are, and I don't want to know. I'm going for a walk, and when I come home, I want you to be gone, I told him as I headed down the stairs. Will you be home in time for supper? I stopped with my hand on the knob and looked up the stairs. The hairs on my neck stood on end. There he was, crouched at the top of the stairs, looking angry and lost at the same time. Just like... I opened the door. I'll be home in plenty of time to feed my cat, I said. Please let Shadow free again. He's a wonderful cat and I want him back. I slammed the front door for a final punctuation mark. San Francisco is known for its hills. In the 2 decades or more I've lived here, however, I've put a great deal of effort into learning how to avoid them when on foot. If I want to walk from A to B, the steepness of the streets, not the distance of the journey, is always my first concern. But on this day, I sought out the hardest climbs I could find. I had a lot of anger to walk off, and when the anger lifted, a lot of fear. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I figured that if I burned up enough energy, I would also burn up the image in my head of this handsome middle-aged man standing in my living room claiming to be my 5-year-old cat. I started out being angry at what he'd said. Somewhere in college, either in American literature or philosophy, I suppose, I had read Thoreau's classic Walden about his psychological adventures at the pond. An unexamined life is not worth living, he had said. If we ever meet, I'll argue the point. It has always seemed to me that self-examination is depressing and pointless. We live the lives we're handed and make the best of things. Trying to analyze the origins of our feelings, well, I put up with some of that when I'm around Sally. But by and large, I steer clear of it. Nevertheless, I don't think of myself as lonely. I have lots of friends, I have volunteer work, I have classes, I have hobbies. Sometimes I have work. I'm out to dinner at least twice a week and lunch more often than not, and never alone. I get voicemail on 2 phones. Why, it takes half an hour to answer my email in the morning, even if I delete all the spam. So I moved quickly past these thoughts onto a more substantive question. Obviously, he wasn't Shadow, so who was he? I heard Sally's voice warning again. If he starts showing up in the daytime when you think you're awake. I shuddered. The worst had happened. But it didn't ring true. I'm not saying that I've always been the most stable, emotionally solid person in any room, but except for those months surrounding my divorce, I've managed pretty well, and this hallucination, if that's what it was so elaborate. I like books and movies, but I'm always surprised by the ending, even when my friends are groaning with foreknowledge. I have very little imagination, and that little is pretty tame. Imagining that my cat had turned into the actor, that was far beyond my abilities. But if I wasn't imagining him, who was he, and why was he tormenting me? What sort of man would creep into my room in the middle of the night and do nothing but lie beside me, even when I invited more? And how did he come and go? Then a more practical issue struck me. If I wasn't imagining this guy, then I'd left a strange man in my house, and I'd been gone the better part of 2 hours. If his intention was to scare me away, the moving van could be loaded with all of my things by this time. Now a great deal of my furniture comes from the house I grew up in. When my parents died so abruptly, I was in no state to make decisions about their belongings, so I just had everything packed up and put in storage. Later, buying a flat of my own, I sent for the stuff. By comparison to the furnishings in the house I now visit, they're war-torn and a bit tacky. But shabby or not, I didn't want to lose them. I turned for home and then stopped in my tracks. Assuming that wasn't that I was imagining this guy, well, then this was a real man. Someone who obviously came and went from my house as he pleased, night and now day. Someone who could take my things whenever he wanted to, which raised more sinister possibilities. Maybe what he wanted was me, and here I was about to offer myself up. I was crossing Clement Street about this time, and an SFPD patrol car was parked outside the donut shop on the corner, as one often was. Okay, then. Stereotypes! Oh! Through the window, I saw the officers popping the last of their treats into their mouths. I went inside without thinking. "Officers," I said, "I need your help." "Of course, ma'am," the taller one said. "What's the problem?" "There's a strange man in my house," I said, wincing at the silliness of the statement. I saw the shorter officer wrestle with a grin as he got up to put their cups and napkins in the trash. "I was busy in my office," I began, thinking that having an office would make me sound less foolish. "There was a crash in the living room, and when I went to look, some furniture had been overturned," I said. Then a man got up from behind the furniture. The tall cop stood. "How did he get in?" "The window, I suppose," though I remembered it being shut.
"And what did he do when he saw you?"
How to answer? "He said the most preposterous things," I said.
"Do you recall exactly what he said? Did he threaten you?"
I don't know what this accent's turning into, but I'm enjoying it. "No, but I was frightened. I told him to leave, and then I grabbed a jacket and ran out of the house."
"Very sensible."
Oh, that's the shorter officer. "Very sensible," the shorter officer said, rejoining our conversation. "No point in putting yourself in harm's way." "I just ran," I said. I didn't know what to do, but I'm afraid to go home now. Do you think you could?"
"Of course, ma'am,"
the taller officer said.
"We'll see you home and have a look around."
My flat was only a few blocks away. The door to my flat, one of 4 in the building, was unlocked when the officer tried it.
"Was he armed, ma'am?"
I hate being called ma'am. "Armed?"
"Did he have a gun A weapon of any kind?
They were unsnapping the covers of their holsters. My God, I don't think so, I said, but now I recognized the possibility. I shivered at the thought of the gun or knife he hadn't had time to use. I don't think so, but I didn't really look. The officer and his partner swept by me and up the stairs, hands on their holstered guns. By that, my neighbors, Mike and Sherry came to the door. Oh my God. By that, it's supposed to have time. Okay. They hadn't seen anybody leave, they said. Not since I dashed out. But that was a couple of hours ago, wasn't it? They asked, fortunately in whispers the police were unlikely to hear. In a few minutes, the officer called from the top of the stairs. Okay, ma'am. The place seems to be empty. You're sure? I said. Did you look in the living room closet? I heard some muttering between them.
Yep, we checked everywhere, the officer said. Come on up, it's safe.
Ooh, this is getting kinky. I started up the stairs, torn between relief and something less comfortable. Nothing seems to be missing. Oh. Nothing seems to be missing, the cop said as I reached him. But why don't you have a quick look around? Make sure. I looked around. The treehouse was sitting as it always had, beside the window, and the lamp was upright on the end table. That can't be, I said.
What, ma'am?
It looks like no one's been here. That's not how it was when I left. Things were knocked over. I thought my lamp was broken. I was so afraid. My cat, I suddenly remembered. He must have taken Shadow. That little guy? The other officer came into view, Shadow clinging to his shoulder. Oh, this little guy. His face turned away from me. I found him in the room off the kitchen, he said. He looks a little shook up, but no damage I can see. Shadow. When I touched him, he flinched just a little bit. Thank God.
Do you want to make a report about this?
The taller officer was saying as I wondered what had happened to the Shadow to make him so skittish. A report?
Yes.
He said.
We've got the approximate time, date, address, but we'll need a brief description.
I suppose, I said. The officer shrugged.
So, can you describe him for us?
I thought. He was a white man, probably in his 40s, or maybe 50s. Tall, but not too tall. Dark hair, green eyes. I said, all of which was true, if incomplete. I could tell the man looked just like the actor, but then I would only confirm that what he already thought. Good looking? The shorter cop put in. God, weird spot to mention. Okay, I felt myself blush. I suppose, I said, trying to lie convincingly. I was really too frightened to notice.
How was he dressed?
Black suit, dark shirt and tie, I said. Expensive? Yes, almost certainly. Armani, I think. The cop nodded.
Not your typical burglar.
I suppose not. I saw the officers exchange a glance again. There was no sign of forced entry or exit, they said. If I wanted to come over to the station sometime, I could look at some mugshots, but that was up to me. They said they saw no reason to open a file. They said, but they saw no reason to open a file. They said, but they'd put an entry in the logbook just in case there was a similar incident elsewhere in the neighborhood. Just in case I wasn't a crazy menopausal dingbat was what they really meant, I supposed. That's it for now, then. Oh, that's it for now, then, the shorter one said, already on his way to the stairs, still carrying Shadow. "My cat," I said. "Sorry." He put Shadow down, but instead of coming to me, Shadow raced into the bedroom. "Shy little guy, I guess," the officer said. "Not really," I said. "He's not himself."